Now, the Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland says the global financial architecture has imbalances which do not take into account the vulnerability of many African economies in climate adaptation. She spoke on the sidelines of a presidential dialogue on African Union financial institutions at the just ended AU summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
If you look at what happened on trade during COVID, we were really delighted that our trade stayed steady and then grew. And when we looked at why it grew, we understood that $141 billion of the $721 billion came from digital trade. And the people who are trading digitally are mainly young people and women. So we really have to drive up that innovation and be the difference we want to make. And so working hand in glove with the African Union on trade, on climate, on the CSET agenda, which is our Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition Agenda, all of that is going to be vitally important if we're going to thrive.
Our President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo was leading a dialogue, a presidential dialogue targeted at seeking for change in the international financial architecture. Do you agree with this posture of these African leaders?
We've been driving this for a long time, and therefore I was absolutely delighted to see, I feel like saying, my Ghanaian president really at the forefront, because if you look back to 2018, the Commonwealth was saying that the financial architecture was simply not fit for purpose. If you look at what is happening in so many of our countries when it comes to climate change, we are categorized as low income, middle income, and high income. Yet many of our countries are acutely vulnerable. And since 2016, when I came into the Secretariat and became the Secretary General, I expressed my determination that we should have an up-to-date vulnerability index, and that should have to be a universal vulnerability index. Because when you are hit by a cyclone or a hurricane, the cyclone doesn't ask you, are you low income? Are you high income? Are you middle income? The cyclone or hurricane takes everything that you've invested in and it dumps it into the sea. The one thing it doesn't take with it is the debt. And the debt is left behind. And our countries have to build back and build back better, and it costs them more money. And so the structure, the financial structure, which does not take into account that vulnerability, simply doesn't work. And as the President was saying this morning, it cannot be fair that we continue to pay higher repayment rates than other countries of similar background, similar opportunity, but of a different hue, those who aren't in the global south. So that imbalance, that unfairness has to be addressed.
Many African countries, including Ghana, are facing a sovereign debt crisis. There is an urgent need for change. How do we drive that change? And how do we, for instance, get many of these African countries, including my country, Ghana, to try and turn the corner? Because that's something that the experts say would need to come in fast. Your take on that?
Well, I think that this is what's being pushed hard, that there has to be a new approach to how we deal with this debt. If you look, there is a direct correlation for many of our countries between the climate disasters and the current debt situation. Until recently, that wasn't absolutely acknowledged. So all of that has to be taken into account. And we are looking at how you restructure debt. We have Meridian, which is the debt management system in the Commonwealth, which deals with both public debt and private debt. And from looking at that data, we can see the trends and how we can help to turn it around. So the arguments that are being pushed very hard with the World Bank and with the IMF have to continue, and it is right. And I'm pleased, as President Ruto mentioned today, that now people are listening. So the fact that Africa and and the Commonwealth in particular have been solidly pushing this issue with our finance ministers, this means that we are getting somewhere. And we've been pushing that hard on the international agenda since 2016, but it has been gaining momentum. You'll know that the Commonwealth came up with our Universal Vulnerability Index, and the reason we say you need a Universal Vulnerability Index is the days when people could say we are all individually responsible for our fiscal health have gone. COVID didn't ask any of us before it struck our income. Climate change didn't ask any of us. None of us were the arbiters or the creators of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. But we were affected in terms of our food security. So these exogenous shocks, which are beyond our control, have to be taken into account. So I agreed with absolutely everything that was said. It is absolutely in alignment with what we are doing on the vulnerability index, and it's something that we will continue. So I did agree without reservation on what all our members said this morning.